And thank you for tuning in to another episode of Stuff That Matters. We are so happy to be joined by the CEO and clinical director at Youth Haven Services, Dawn Johnson. She's also the author of her book, I Survived So Far, which can be found on Amazon. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome to have you on here, Don. I know we started talking about this, I don't know, a few months ago at the I2I conference in North Carolina. And I wanted to share with you to kind of open stuff up. When this idea to have you come on our podcast occurred, like a lightning bolt, it hit me that you'd be a perfect person to have on this
Hmm.
podcast. I remember we are at Cherokee at a conference for benchmarks, and I can't remember. We are in a like a plenary session or a large group session, and there was a prompt for people to share an experience or tell something about their story. I don't remember the exact prompt, but what I do remember is you getting up and talking. And I remember that just grabbed me for a variety of reasons, right? You got a story that needs to be told, but you and I go back sometime. We've known each other probably 14 years working in this space. So I consider you a leader, a colleague, and a friend.
Hmm.
And so when I heard there was some things that I didn't know about you in those three areas, right? Colleague, leader, friend. There were some things I just didn't know about you. And when you got up and spoke in that conference, I was like, boy, we got to get Dawn on here just to
Hmm.
tell her story. So I'm not really sure where to dive in, but you've written this book that I have sitting next to me, and I wanted to just ask you first and foremost, like, how'd that come to be? When did you decide to write your book and put it out there for public consumption? Your story.
Well, first, I do want to say, Mike, really quickly. I remember that conference well. It was Patch Adams was the speaker,
Right.
and he was talking about finding joy. And I think I actually
Mm.
mentioned this in my book, and I mentioned you not by name, but that experience I remember because after his prompt was tell about a time you had to rely on nature, friends, or God to get through something, and it just hit me and I stood up and I said, I've relied on all three of those and here's why. And it kind of gave a little, and afterwards going down the hall, you stopped me and like, can I just give you a hug? I didn't know that about you. And I just appreciate you sharing that. And that touched me so much because people don't always know how to act. They don't know what to say. They don't know, but you were perfect in that. And I just remembered that. And so anyway, thank you for that. So I didn't start it as a writing a book. It started, in the beginning when you look at it was January 2016, and it was one of those sleepless nights that I had had many of at that point, just worrying about my kids with various things. And so it started more as a therapeutic process for me. And when I got up during the middle of the night to literally start just putting it on paper, it was more like get it out of my mind, get it on paper so maybe I can sleep tonight. But for some reason I chose to write it in a way of like I'm telling a story and I'm talking to somebody. But it was really just a therapeutic journal is what it was going to be. And then as I kept journaling various events, and they continued through the year. Then at some point, my kids were saying, you need to write a book. You need to make this a book. You need to share this because there's parts of this that might be helpful to somebody else. So then I kind of went back and formatted it into more of a book that made a little more linear sense and made a little more of a. And I feel funny even still calling it a book. It's just my story. It's just documenting a lot of my stuff, my thoughts, and then once I started reflecting on how am I getting through this, as each event continued and continued and continued to grow in severity and get worse and just my struggles. And so I started reflecting on why is this happening and what could I've done differently and how am I surviving.
Hmm.
Because as I mentioned, I titled it I Survived So Far. And those words so far, I just remember were pointing at when I was like, well, because at that time it was just struggling with teenage kids and things that go on. And I'm like, I'm surviving this, I'm surviving.
Yep.
Um, and so that's when, I realized I need to make this actual book that somebody could read and if it can help somebody. And I struggle with the vulnerability of that a lot. putting everything out there. But if it can help somebody, that's all we're here for.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I think grief, and there's a lot of things in our culture that we're uncomfortable talking about. I would say grief and loss might be one of the top. Do you mind just, for folks who haven't found you yet or your story, do you mind just sharing a little bit about again, it's story of loss and grief and pressing forward, but do you mind just sharing a little bit about some of your experiences?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of weird because the grief started before the deaths, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I was grieving the loss of what we think when we have children, what we expect, what we hope for, the pictures we paint in our mind of what our little family's going to be like, what our children are going to grow up to be like. And as I was losing that through the years with various things, with the teenage stages and what was happening, and then my divorce, and then a lot of grief was going on, and then the first death came August 2019 with my grandson, who was 15 months old. And that just hit us out of nowhere. It was a shock. And when you lose somebody, I mean, losing a loved one is always hard. Losing a child is always unbearable. But I think when it comes out of nowhere, in the middle of the night, when you get that phone call and it just jolts your whole soul, everything gets shattered a little bit in fragments. And at that point, when I got that phone call, my whole focus became protecting Taylor, my daughter, his mother. And so flying to Florida, in the wee hours of the morning with my aging parents and trying to take care of them at the same time and trying to get on the right plane. And I talk about that in the book, how I was getting on the wrong plane to Jamaica and kind of chuckling inside, like, I wish I was going to Jamaica. Like, I mean, there's all these insanity things that start going on in your mind and you really just, it's a surreal experience. And you're just you become a robot a little bit. I can only speak for me. I became a little bit of a robot, and my whole focus was getting to Taylor, taking care of Taylor, because she had already told me on the phone, I'm going to be with Bear tonight. That was his name, Bear.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be with Bear tonight, and I need you to come here so I can say goodbye to you. So my whole focus is getting there to save my daughter at that point. And of course, we get there and she's at an attorney's office. Everything's just chaos. They're investigating a homicide because anytime a child dies, I learned that they begin to investigate immediately. And we're all just confused and shocked and trying to get through it. And then, of course, that night in the hotel, she tries to overdose. And of course, I explain all this in the book, but she's running out of the hotel, trying to chase her. I think she was 67 at the time. My mom is running behind us. We're running out into traffic on the highway, trying to stop her. And we're all in the middle of the highway, and the sheriff car, slams on brakes, blue lights on. They're handcuffing her, pulling her across the highway. I'm screaming, that's my daughter, because, and for some reason I'm yelling, she just lost a baby. She lost her baby. She lost her baby. Mm-hmm. He was 15 months old, but in our minds, he was a baby. And I think everybody thought she had a miscarriage or something. And not that that's any less traumatic, but he didn't get it. There was no sympathy. And so they took her, threw her in the back of a fire truck, which is what Florida used at the time. And then she ended up in the hospital, and we went, found her in the emergency room, screaming in torment. And the nurses there, same thing. They didn't understand it and thought she had lost a baby. And then once I said he's 15 months old, then they realized, oh, they were here this morning. And then they realized that's the child. She came in this morning screaming, carrying him in. And so that was the first of the just waves hit us. 4 months later, Taylor, because I spent 4 months trying to keep her alive.
Right.
And there's lots of stories to that. But I, and then when she left my house, December 18th, said she was going to visit a friend 4 months after we had lost Bear. She didn't come home. And she was 24 years old at the time. So you know, I thought maybe she'd spent the night with his friend. I knew the friend, and it was late, and she never came home the next day. And so then I go through in the book about how I got the phone call and the detective showed up at my house and all that. But there's just things you go through. There's things, that morning at work, my colleague was like, "Oh, I'm looking forward to the Christmas party tonight. The staff work, the party."
Right.
And I'm like, well, maybe I'll be there, maybe not. You know how my life is now. Because I would spend days, that whole 4 months, I just spent waking up, going into her room, and hoping she was breathing.
Right.
And I remembered I would always go to the bathroom and put clothes on before I went to her room. Because somewhere in my head, if I have to administer CPR, if I have to call 911, I need to be prepared to do that. And that was just a weird robotic survival response, whatever you call it. But I did that for 4 months. And when she didn't come home that day, and then, they found her at someone's house. And so that was the second loss and funeral and obituary to write and all of that. And I did the eulogy. I wrote the eulogy. I stood up, I performed the eulogies at her funeral. Because I needed to do that for her. And Taylor and I had a very close relationship. We talked a lot about death and dying. We talked about the spiritual realm. We had always had a real close connection like that. And so I did her eulogy, and then my son and my remaining daughter, he was a bright light. He's the comedian of the family. My son, he was 21 at the time, and he would share songs with me and share things with me and quotes and just call me and just kept me going. And 10 months later, he was murdered and shot and killed in a marijuana robbery, from what it appears from the investigation. And that was just the third wave that, I thought was going to be the end of it for me. But he had a daughter who was 3 at the time. And I had my daughter, Allie, my youngest. And I had to survive for them. People always want to say, well, how are you not in a psych hospital? How are you not committed somewhere?
Right.
How are you not just in the bed? I would just be in the bed. And I'm like, I didn't have a choice. I mean, the quote, you never know how strong you are until you have no choice but to be, or something like that. That was it. I had no choice. I had to be here for Allie, and I had to be here for my granddaughter. And so every day, and then I felt I had to be there for my clients and my agency in a weird way. Like, and then there's that guilt in the background. I had run my agency for, at that time, 18, 19 years, had built it from the ground up and had helped thousands of children.
Right.
But I couldn't save my own. And that was tough in a weird way. So yet I had to keep going to keep helping those people, and then also helping my daughter and my granddaughter. And so somehow God just said, you're just going to keep going and doing what you do every day. And so that's what I did. That's what I do.
Unbelievable. And the fact that you're continuing on, and I know you didn't have a choice, or I emailed these guys this morning and I said, we have a extremely brave and courageous, beautiful person who's going to be joining us today.
No.
And that story is very, very, very tough, right? It's hard. It's, as a dad, as somebody who cares for kids and families, but mostly as a dad, that's a hard one to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And in a very candid moment, I'll tell you that, you have conversations with those that are close to you, and you're like, if I ever lost my kid, I'm not far behind. I don't know how I would get through that.
That's right.
And so how did you do you know how you got through this? Is there is it your faith? Is it friend? How'd you get through this?
Well, I've said the same thing in years past, Mike. I mean, I used to say the same thing, golly, I can't imagine if I ever lost a kid. Oh my God, I can't imagine. I
Right.
remember saying those things, feeling that when you would hear about somebody who'd lost a child. Um, it's not one thing, I don't think, that it's not one way or reason I got through it. I could say because of my faith. I could say God carried me through it. I could say, oh, Allie, because I had to be here for Allie and Mercy, my other granddaughter. Um, sure, all of those things it culminated, into one. I think it was more than anything, it was my kids that I had lost, that their life on this earth was cut short.
Mhm.
And I felt I owed it to them, really, to continue living and to continue finding joy. Because we had such a close relationship and we had talked so candidly, all of us. We were just very close. And I started my social work career 30 some years ago in skilled nursing care. And so death and dying was a regular part of our days. And I can remember when someone was passing, actively passing, and I would hear it from the nurses. I would go to their room, and I was 25 at the time. But this sounds weird, but it was peaceful for me to be there with them because what how much closer to God and to the spirit world can we get than when that portal is actually being opened and that spirit is actually passing from that body? And to me, that was the closest I would be to the spirit world, to God, and so to watch a soul leave a body was not lost on me. And that was an early career experience I had. And I worked at hospice for a little while after that. And um, then shortly after, I ended up in mental health and stayed there ever since. But, I would talk to my kids about that. We had grandparents passing, and I would take them to the funerals and we would talk. My dad talked to me about early on. I remember when I was little going to a funeral of my great grandfather, and daddy saying, that's not him. And that's his body, he's not there. So we always talked about that. Taylor told me she wanted to be cremated. Like, we always knew what we wanted. And we knew that our time was limited on this earth. And like I said in their eulogies, when we're born, we're not given an amount of time. Nobody says, oh, you're going to have 83.5 years. You're going to have 71 years. We don't know. So it's all fleeting. It's all, every day is fleeting. And so all of those conversations and understandings and thoughts and feelings and belief systems culminated into, okay, this is it. Okay, their life in their bodies as we know it on this earth is ended. But mine has not. Allie's has not. Mercy's has not. And for some reason, we're still here. So whatever that is, I owe that to them to continue finding that. And just like Patch Adams at that conference talked about, is finding joy. And there are days that I have to search and find and, literally look for it and find it. But I do. And I talk to them. And there are signs and dreams. If you read the book, you hear about all the things that Ross gave me, all the signs, all the things Taylor gave me. Taylor's was feathers, Ross was coins. And for a good couple of years after they passed, those were regular occurrences. They were regular. I mean, there's more than in the book. There's more stories than I couldn't fit into the book. But that's what kept me going. They were cheering me on from another realm and saying, Mama, do it. Mama, keep going. And so we were always each other's cheerleader. And so if I had to choose something, I think that's what it was. Them just saying, you're still here. You are still living. So live.
This is the iHeartMedia Charlotte Women of Impact, celebrating women in our community, presented by the Carolina Ascent and New Hope Treatment Centers.
My name is Kiara, and I am the Mental Health Ambassador for New Hope Treatment Centers.
Now, if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give, or what would you say? Don't do that, do it this way instead. Would you change anything?
Would change a whole bunch. But with being gentle with myself, I would remind myself that the things that you are doing are often the things that you are created to do.
Hear the full interview on this station's website, presented by the Carolina Ascent and New Hope Treatment Centers.
Hey, I'm Jen Manti, Admissions Director at New Hope. As we celebrate International Women's History Month, I want to recognize all the amazing young women New Hope cares for every day across the Carolinas and beyond. They truly are our future. For more information, visit newhopetreatment.com.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Gaston, talent recruiter at New Hope. During International Women's History Month, I want to encourage anyone who has a big heart for youth to consider joining our incredible team. Visit newhopetreatment.com.
Hi, I'm Dr. Melissa Schuler, Program Director at New Hope. During International Women's History Month, I want to shout out all of our incredible female leaders that help make this organization so special. You contribute so much to our mission. Join a mission that matters. Visit newhopetreatment.com.
Dawn, I sometimes I don't necessarily have questions, but I'm curious your thoughts on this. So my wife's aunt had to bury both of her daughters, and she had two daughters, and their youngest died in a car accident, and then their oldest passed about 4 or 5 years ago from an overdose. And very, I think, probably some similar dynamics there of feeling like the inevitable is coming, and you don't know how you can stop this tidal wave from happening. And we've spoke to some wonderful people on the podcast before just about addiction and losing folks to addiction, But Teresa, who lost both of her daughters, we talk about her a lot. She has just the most remarkable perspective on life of anybody I've ever met. And I think I know that there is a well of sadness that's there, and that there's a void there that doesn't go away. But her ability to help other people navigate through challenges and difficulties and put them in perspective. And it's not a comparison perspective, or it's not trite like that. It's just this deep, profound understanding of, I don't know if it's the fragility of life or what it is, but just the way that she navigates life is profound. And I know it's linked to having been so impacted by loss. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but she's just one of those people I'm like, you want to talk to somebody who's got perspective on life, talk to Teresa. And if you think some of your stuff, you're never going to get through your stuff. And it's not about comparing tragedy.
Right.
But she never does that, but she just puts life in perspective.
Well, you said it. I mean, it's perspective, and that's what it is. It changes your perspective completely. And yes, same thing, what I have to do, I have to fight against not dismissing people's stuff, because everything is real for everybody, right? So everybody's perspective is their own, everybody's grief, their own, their pain, their own. So when my friends, and then this affects my friendships, this affects everything, because it just shakes you to the core of everything, every relationship, conversation. Go ahead. Did you want to say something, Matt?
No. I just, I think that's, the things that we complain about on a day-to-day basis, and the things that we act like they are real tragedies, but are not. It's not, and again, it's not to dismiss anybody, but I can't imagine how hard that would be for you and for folks who've experienced true loss to listen to some of the nonsense that people talk about. I don't know.
I know it's funny because a lot of people say, "Oh, Dawn, you should go into private practice. You need to do this. You need to do that. And I think, I don't know if I would be very good at that, because I might be. And again, no. So what I do now, when people come to me and they talk about, "Oh, I'm worried because my daughter didn't get into the college she wanted, and she this and she that," and I just, I empathize with them, and I'm so sorry. I know that struggle, and I know you're disappointed in that. So I try my best to
Right.
validate everybody's, because it's real. It's real for everybody. So I don't take that away from anybody, but I also see some of my friends tiptoeing and not wanting to tell me about this thing. And I'm like, no, tell me. It's okay. Your daughter's boyfriend broke up with her and she's sad. It's okay. We can talk about it. So I try not to, because some people are sensitive to that. Oh, I can't tell Dawn because look what she's been through. I don't want that either. I don't want people tiptoeing. But at the same time, so what I do, it sounds like what your wife's aunt, I think you said, what she's trying to do as well is just share if it's appropriate and time and it works for that person, share the perspective. And it's funny, yesterday I was at my office and we're on the phone with DHSR. I'm sure y'all familiar with licensure, and we're trying to get a group home beds increased, and she was being not very nice, and she said, it just sounds like you're a little emotional and maybe we need to talk when you're not going through some things. And I just started laughing. I said, ma'am, this is not upsetting me at all. I promise you, trust me, this DHSR paperwork, no, this is not upsetting me. I just need you to understand that the rule is this. And yeah, so anyway, I won that argument. So that was good. But fine, it had nothing to do with that. But she was wrong about the rule. But I just laugh. I'm like, I am not upset about this. Y'all don't even know. And it's people that don't know what I've been through.
Right.
They're like, oh. And so it is a gift. It really is a gift. If you look at it that way, that what a gift we've been given, Teresa and myself and any parent who's been through something like this, to have that perspective that the little things, that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, or whatever that was, really and truly, it does matter. It doesn't matter. So that's a gift in life.
I did have one of my questions. I'm curious, what has because you've been in this field before and during and after all of this, and I'm a licensed counselor and therapist, and you always kind of take, most grad schools, you take one grief and loss class or something, and you read one book on Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief or whatever.
Right.
And most people then go on their whole career and pray that you never even have to touch it ever again. Yeah. What, from your own personal lived experience, what do you think are some of the misconceptions, even that people in our mental health trauma space, the professionals, get wrong about this journey?
Oh my goodness, so much. I mean, first of all, the stages of grief. I don't even think that really exists. I think they're all real stuff, and I think they all come and go, but there is not like, oh, here's the stage you may go through first, and then you may go through this, and then you may experience this.
Not this progressive kind of.
No. And everybody I've talked to, and I've been parts of groups and support groups and things, every person I talk to that's experienced a loss, no, it's not the case. So I don't know where that came from, but it's because it's all over the place. And if we're being, it's person-centered. We all learn about person-centeredness in our careers. It is absolutely individualized. So what you might feel or experience on today or this month or this year in 5 years may be very different than how I experience grief and loss, right? So it all depends on what we bring to the table as far as our personalities, our experiences, our beliefs, our coping mechanisms, our everything. And it depends on the type of loss. I mean, I had lost people before my 3 children. I had lost grandparents, aunts, I was very close to. It depends. Everything depends. And so that's all I would say. And I say that in everything in my career, at my agency. I've always said that. You cannot paint people with a brush. I don't care what we're talking about, if it's grief, if it's cultural beliefs, if it's norms of this or values of that or ethnicities or what. All that training, just be with the person. Just be with the person, because we're all individuals. We're all different. And so you cannot sit down in a therapeutic session and say, okay, I'm bringing my training and my experience, and this person's probably going through this and this and this and this, or we're going to treat this and this. No. Where are you? Where is the person? Where are you today? How can I help you get to where you want to be? Because it's all different for everybody. And depending on my day, and I could go into a therapy session this month and feel one way and need one thing, and go into it in a couple of months and be in a whole different frame of mind and need something different. So it's just not prescriptive. None of it is.
Yeah. So I had a question around those 4 months when you were with Taylor, right? And you were doing your best with Taylor as a mental health professional. This is, like my team gets calls all the time with parents in crisis, or, how can they help their children? I'm curious, as a mental health professional in this world, and having lived that experience and gone through that, did you find that your personal experience in the mental health space was helpful? Was accessing services an issue? We know that the system's broken, but we've been doing this a long time, and I think it's always been broken. I'm wondering, will it ever not be broken? So my mind kind of goes there a little bit. Knowing what you know now, knowing what you know before, and having lived it, was having your lived experience as a mental health professional, was it helpful, or, service access and things like that?
I think my experience was helpful. Service access, no, because, and I had started this back in, I think it was 2017, when my son had his psychotic episode from a drug-induced psychosis. I write about that in the book as well, but trying to find help for him, trying to get the accurate diagnosis, trying to get a psychiatrist to see him in the hospital, and not great. I mean, so I felt the frustration of so many clients before me. But as a mother, when you're going through that, everything kind of goes out the window. So, as a professional, if that were my family that I'm helping, I would be able to clearly say, okay, here's what we need to do. Let's try to call this. Let's check this. Let's work on that. Here's probably the next step. As a mother, you just kind of lose everything, and you're just like, help my child, I need help. And you're going from door to door, making phone calls, trying everything. No, we won't see him because it's a substance use issue. No, we won't see him because he's actively psychotic. No, we won't see him because he had, because he's this age. No, we won't see him because he's that age. It's like, so very frustrating. And then you mix it all together, the parent and the clinician, and the CEO of an agency. And so you mix it all together, and you're just like, I kept him home. I ended up keeping him home out of the hospital and treating him myself at home for a month. Now, he saw a psychiatrist, he got on some meds, but I titrated him off of them and got him back to reality. It took me a month to get him back to reality and lucid, and off of his drug-induced psychosis. But we got him there, and then he went down different roads, and then, but with Taylor and the addiction, I didn't know she was addicted until Bear passed, and then brought her home. And then I'm still not sure what really was going on with her. I know the boyfriend had heroin charges that I found out about. We think there was fentanyl laced heroin in the home, and that's where Bear got a hold of it. And once we found out he died from fentanyl poisoning, we are assuming that's where the detectives were leading with the case. I was kind of just running around trying to hide Taylor from the detectives, trying to keep her alive. I didn't want her to go to jail in her state of grief and loss. And so I was just kind of on robot mode. And you mentioned, Teresa, seeing the eventual demise. Sometimes with addiction, you do go through that as a parent. I think of, is today going to be the day? At what point? And again, hers was suicidality, and at that point she was addicted to Xanax and taking whole bars of Xanax and just trying to stay asleep, just trying to stay out of her pain, and begging me to let her go be with Bear. And so then I had the whole new conflict of, how do I look into my daughter's eyes and assure her that Bear's at peace, Bear's fine, Bear's in heaven, Bear is he is better than all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she says, and I want to be there too. That's where I want to be.
Right.
That's what I need to be. That's where I want to go. And then I'm like, well, no, stay here on this earth with me in this crappy situation. And so all of that stuff came about, but I'm like, it's not your time. It's not your time. Nope. It was his time. It's not your time. And so that's what I kept working with. And it became a very torturous 4 months of trying to keep her alive. I don't think she did it on purpose. The coroner ended up ruling it an overdose. She had fentanyl-laced Xanax. She had fentanyl and Xanax in her toxicology because Christmas was a week later, and she had already purchased gifts for all of us. She had purchased an outfit, some boots to wear for Christmas. She had bought a dress, and all of those deliveries were coming to my house after she passed. So I think she intended to be here for us.
And like you said, she was just trying to not feel pain.
Yep.
And I was going to say a lot of the components to your story immediately makes me think of my aunt, who had to bury her 5-year-old daughter. This is more than 20 years ago now. And then 3 years ago, her husband had an accidental overdose as well, fentanyl laced, I believe. And at the time when her youngest at the time, her daughter passed away 20 years ago, she had 2 other daughters older that I think really gave her, like you said, the kind of that sense of purpose, trying to find that joy in life. And then after her husband passed away, she now has 4 kids. And then she inherited the firework business that my uncle started years ago. So life goes on in a sense, I guess, but it's obviously not that easy. So you mentioned trying to find that joy. Maybe this was a conversation you had with your youngest daughter, obviously being a CEO. What for you, I guess, worked with the coping? Maybe it was the grief that you experienced prior to the tragedies. Like I said, maybe a conversation you had with your daughter. What really worked for you the most, I would say, and still works to this day, allowing you to push forward?
Well, my immediate response, Patrick, is because what's the alternative? It would be a very sad, life for me if I didn't choose to do that, to push forward. So yes, I do it for Allie. Yes, I do it for my now 2 granddaughters, as Allie has now had a child. So I do it for them, but also for me. And somebody could say that's selfish, but again, I know my kids are going, Mama, you do it, you keep going. So I travel a lot as much as I can. I love to experience life because I don't know how much more I have of it here on this earth. And if nothing else, I have learned that. So I'm not going to just sit around and be sad and be miserable, because who is that helping and what good is that? So I love to experience life. Every time I travel, I was in Alaska last week. The sights, the experiences, I jump into it with both feet. I do everything I can. I spent 2 days feeding the homeless of Anchorage, pretty large homeless population there. My daughter had a big heart for the homeless. She did a lot for them in Florida. So that is how I bring my children with me.
Yeah.
And so everywhere I go, every travel experience, every beautiful sight I see, nature is big for me. Everything I breathe in and taste and just viscerally try to experience is because I'm living up everything I can on this earth, on this life, for my children too, because even though I believe they're completely fine, they're at peace and they're in a beautiful, and they have shown me that in dreams, there's still an element of the stuff we have here on earth that's beautiful. Right. And in this life that I'm going to live it up and eat it up and drink it in, and for them as well, and take them with me on that journey.
25 and 12. Simple, seemingly ordinary numbers, but these numbers hold a special meaning at New Hope and prompted us to take action. 25, the percentage of young men diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder, a number that is growing. 12, the average number of months families must wait for specialized residential treatment. But those days are over. Welcome to New Hope's Learning Enriched Autism Program, or as we like to call it, LEAP. New Hope may not change the 25, but we're impacting the 12. We're expanding this program from 6 to 20 beds, investing in the highest quality of treatment models and support systems. LEAP's team of specialists combines the best autism research with trauma-informed care and relational connections to create an environment where our youth thrive. At LEAP, youth learn the skills to reintegrate into their communities and chase their dreams. Families receive the support and resources to ensure this is the last residential treatment they'll ever need. With our enhanced program, the number that holds the most meaning to us now is 40. That's the number of successful LEAP graduates we anticipate annually. That's 40 lives changed. That's 40 families finding new hope through LEAP. That's our name. That's our promise.
Don, pivoting a little bit. Well, first of all, my mind keeps going to I think you need to be on the main stage instead of Patch Adams next time, maybe. No offense to Patch, but I can probably.
No offense to Patch.
No offense to Patch.
You.
Patch is a friend of the podcast now.
Yeah.
But your story and just the way that you speak certainly just it's inspiring. It makes me again, perspective makes me want to live life and not waste time. Not waste time with my kids and not waste time with my friends, or all these opportunities. But I'd love to, get some time in about your life's work and your organization that you run and the work that your team does. Mm-hmm. Do you mind, bringing our audience up to speed on what is Youth Haven? What are you all doing out there? Where do you stand right now in your mission and all the things there?
Sure. Youth Haven Services was born in 2002 when I was a social worker back at the County Mental Health Center, and back in the day, and things were a lot different, and seeing a lot of bad stuff in group homes. Honestly, I was a case manager. I was pulling kids out of group homes left and right because of stuff I was seeing. So I decided to open a good quality group home, and I left there, partnership with my dad. And one other lady at the time, we opened Youth Haven at a group home, and it just kind of grew from there. So every year thereafter, for about 10 years, every year we were adding a new service line, and it was growing because of the needs that were identified in the community. And so we just kept adding services, added a couple more group home facilities. And then in 2017, we were acquired by Seaside Healthcare out of Louisiana, and just saw fit that with all the Medicaid changes, it'd be better to be part of a larger organization. And so we did that. And then they put me over Turning Point Family Services down in the Charlotte area. So now I'm the CEO of them as well. They're our sister company. So I'm over both agencies. And so we have a wide array of services today in, I think, 8 counties maybe. And cover more counties, but I think we have offices in 8, and I think it is now. And so between the two agencies, large foster care services, intensive and home, residential, we started a new sort of a pilot program in the state, CSTP, Crisis Stabilization Transition Program, where they're using level 3 facilities for these short-term crises.
I think Turning Point has a home like our North Carolina home. I think our directors of those homes collaborate quite a bit.
That's right. You do. I've been on some meetings with them. That's right. Yes. Yep. So same thing. Our Turning Point's home is in Concord, and then Youth Haven has 3. 2, getting ready to open the 3rd one, which was my licensure thing yesterday. So a wide array of services. Very proud of our services. We've always been focused on quality, kindness, respect, treating people like people and not numbers. And so I think we've done as well as anybody can in this industry with that, with all the pressures we have from everywhere we have them from. But we care about people, and I like to think that I started the company. I hired our first employee. I've always trained. I used to do all of our trainings, and for me, it was just big, customer service, kindness, seeing people as they are when they come in the door. They are oftentimes at their wits' end. We're their last hope. They don't know where else to turn when they come in our doors, and we need to see that and remember that. And so we've always just kind of tried my best to instill that across everybody. It gets harder. The larger you get, the harder that gets to touch all the staff. And, sure. That, but I think, I think we do good quality work and care about people. So
it's interesting because that what you just said reminds me of kind of how we're built, right? We care.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we did internally yesterday, and I'll share the book with you, we've kind of relooked at our values, and we have what we're calling like our new North Star. We've always been New Hope, our name, our promise, which I think is a great kind of statement of who we are and what we do. But we're going to weave compassion into our values, and our first kind of value is start with compassion, whether it's towards a client's family, a coworker, a leader, whatever situation at work you find yourself in. We would like all of us to start with compassion, because it'll carry you a lot further in the shared goal of New Hope, which is healing those we serve, right? So anyway, I'm going to share the book with you. We got the author of the book, co-author of the book, coming up in a couple weeks. Okay. He's going to speak about his book, Compassionomics.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, please share that with me. And I love to hear that. And I've always seen that in New Hope as well. Our motto has been for probably 20 years, empower, hope, and heal. And so we just created, our leadership team got together the end of 2024, a few months ago, and created our new values list and our values. And so what are they? And compassion was one of those. And so nice. I love it. I love that we're getting that back into our mental health care. If we don't have compassion for people, we can't help people.
Right.
100%.
Dawn, Mike gave the final question before we started recording, but I'm going to ask you now. You've been doing this for the most part, the better part of the last 45, 50 minutes. But anyway, for you, what is the stuff that matters?
Well, the easy answer is compassion, right?
We teed it up.
We teed it right up.
I think that it truly, I will say, live while you can, live while you are. Just live and love people and show love everywhere you can. And that compassion goes right along with that. So that to me is all that matters.
Well, I think a lot, but I think that live and love is a perfect way to end our time with you today, Dawn. And I'll say from my heart, and I can speak for Matt and Patrick, thank you for being a part of this little podcast we have. Thank you for being so brave and so honest about your story. And thank you for sharing your love with us. And we'd like to share it right back with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dawn.
Yeah,
thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your time and listening to my story. It's a way for me to bring my children along with me. Thank you so much.
And for folks listening, please go on Amazon. I Survived So Far. If you want to hear a real and authentic journey of loss, but also of perseverance and continuing on the legacy of those that we've lost, I think it's awesome. So please check out Dawn's book and support her any way you can. So. Dawn, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.